you think you need to invest more money in police across the nation? Would you push for more investment?
Yeah, we have plenty out there. The thing is that the governors have to loosen it up, make it available. Mayors have to make it available. It's there. It's not a question. You had a question, sir.
My question is, do you condemn the police force in Israel for their actions at the funeral of the Palestinian American journalist?
I don't know all the detail, but I know it has to be investigated. I don't know all the detail.
Then would you go to support reporters, sir?
If I can, I'll ask you too first about what we're doing here, if you can. There are some concerns about leniency of prosecutors right now. What you have in terms of leverage to help enforce them doing more to hold criminals accountable, and separately your concerns, if you have any, on bail reform. Then I have a separate one, if I can just allow it. A lot of parents are watching about baby formula. If you have a message to those parents that you can share while they're listening.
Well, three questions. I'll answer the baby formula question because all of a sudden it's on the front page of every newspaper, and it's important that I be responded to. But look, with regard to the leniency of prosecutors, that has, on balance, not been the biggest problem, the leniency of prosecutors. In the past, the hardest process has been the intensity of prosecutors, people getting long sentences for crimes that are, anyway. And so, and bail reform, I think bail reform and the negative side of bail reform is vastly overrated. The idea that if you have no ability to make bail because you're poor, it should relate to the severity of the crime and what the problem is related that you're accused of. With regard to the issue of formula, we've done three things, and I know Jen Psaki spoke to this today. Number one, we're releasing guidance today to all the states of the possible flexibilities in the WIC program, the Women, Infant, Children program, because they're very sort of strict guidelines that when you walk in, if you have a WIC, you can go in and purchase a certain amount of formula, but you can't purchase more of it. The problem is the packaging issues are becoming a difficulty. And so we've changed it so that the WIC program, you can buy what's on the shelf, so that they're not as it's the top issue raised with me. So the flexibility to have formula in stock should not depend on whether you have it packaged exactly what meets the requirement for that for people on the WIC program. Secondly, the FDA just issued a statement. We worked on it. I was on the telephone. And by the way, that on the WIC program, when I spoke to Walmart and I spoke to the major distributors for an hour or so, yesterday, the day before, I can't remember, they wanted to have this flexibility because they didn't want to be violating the law. Secondly, the top issue for retailers raised with me. Secondly, the FDA just issued a statement about importation of formula from abroad. The FDA has been looking at will be working with manufacturers to facilitate the incorporation of formulas from abroad that, in fact, in places like Europe, where we can get more product on U.S. shelves. That's underway. I think we're going to be in a matter of weeks or less getting significantly more formula on shelves. And the FDA is also going to ensure we can import and still maintain the high safety standards. And the third thing that is, there's more to say about each of these, but the third major thing we're doing is that finally, any parent who has a serious question about where the particular formula they need, because there's very different formulas, some are very precise, and if they don't get the exact right formula, the impact on the child is extremely negative. We have set up a system whereby you can contact HHS and go to www.hhs.gov/formula. It just launched this website to help parents find resources, obtain formulas, including contact with companies and food banks and health providers that, in fact, may have access to the particular formula they need. This is a process. We're working on it very, very hard. There's nothing more urgent we're working on than that right now, and I think we're going to be making some significant progress very shortly. All the way in the back.
Mr. President, Republicans have said that your administration should have anticipated this baby formula shortage before. Are you satisfied with your administration's response so far and some of the steps that you and your administration are taking now, including loosening these import requirements next week? Should you have taken those steps sooner before parents got to these shelves and couldn't find formula?
If we'd been better mind readers, I guess we could have, but we moved as quickly as the problem became apparent to us. And we have to move with caution as well as speed, because we got to make sure what we're getting is in fact first-rate product. That's why the FDA has to go through the process.
Thank you. Mr. President, I'm so sorry to take you to so far. I'm going to ask a question about Africa, because recently you sent your Deputy Secretary of State to Africa. She visited 3 countries, Gabon, Angola, and South Africa. So in Angola, she spoke with President Lorenzo, and when she gave her report to the media, she said that she's been seeing in Angola many progress in terms of human rights, fighting corruption, and also better business environment for the America's investor. Are you aware of what is going on in Angola, Mr. President?
I'm aware of her. I'm waiting for her report. I've been on the phone with the president of South Africa at length on those same issues. And I've been on the phone and been in contact with other African leaders. There is a need for a significant increase in focusing on human rights and not abusing human rights, but there's also a need for us to, what we're doing is trying to figure out how can we help African countries accommodate the changes they have to make in terms of to deal with their environmental problems as well as dealing with infrastructure problems. And so I convinced the G7 to agree that we would put together a program where we would, the advanced economic nations of the world, would provide the kind of resources without any strings attached to increase environmental capacity as well as dealing with other problems in African nations. There's 1 billion people, and so we're working very hard to try to get hold of that.
Are you visiting Africa soon, Mr. President?
Yes, Mr. President.
I'm only going to keep them standing here another few minutes.
No worries, Mr. President. I'll make it quick. Mr. President, I just
they
want to
came
ask
to the
you.
press conference, right, guys?
Thank you, sir. I appreciate your time. I just want to ask you, what further executive action are you considering to do police reform? You know that's pretty much stalled in Congress for right now. And I also want to ask you another question, if I can, on foreign relations. You spoke with both of the leaders of Sweden and Finland today. What's your message to President Putin after those, essentially those threats that he gave, at least to Finland?
With regard to the second question, I'm not going to go into the detail of my private conversations with the President of Sweden and Finland, except that we had a good conversation and they expressed their interest and desires relating to security. And there will be more to report on that shortly. With regard to the first question was what again?
What additional action are you considering on police reform? We know your administration.
What I've done by executive order is done what I can, insisting that on police reform for federal officers, no chokeholds, no knock warrants, etc. That's going to continue. But one of the things I've decided to do, the best way to get the reform done as quickly as possible is to go local and to make sure we invest in the police departments, the local and county and city police departments. Because one of the things we talked about in the cabinet room is that I don't know any cop who likes a bad cop. I mean that sincerely. I grew up in a neighborhood in Claymont where you became a cop, a firefighter, or a priest. And I'm not joking. The guys I know in the police forces, the last thing they want is a bad cop, a bully, a thug being on the force. So the idea that somehow there's this overwhelming desire to protect a bad cop, it's the leadership's role to make sure they find them, get rid of them, and if they violate a crime, prosecute them. Thank you all so very, very much.